My research as a psychologist, of course, is primarily focused around the well-being of kids. I do lots of work in school around social and emotional well-being. I focus a lot on mental health difficulties and promoting positive well-being in children. And it won't come as a surprise to you to know that when we're interested in well-being, we've got to be interested in kids' social relationships. Because we're very social creatures, aren't we? We're connected with other people. It's true for all of us, and it's true for children as well. The way that we relate to other people, our feeling of belonging, our feeling of being accepted, of being connected with other people, is absolutely central to our sense of well-being. Now, it's interesting because the school context is really powerful context for all of these things to develop. And this, I think, is a really important point. We cannot get into this mode of thinking that there's a trade-off between this, as you were putting it before, I think wrongly termed softer side of feeling good and well-being and feeling connected with other people, and the hard sort of academic stuff. Because actually, being connected with other people and feeling positive, being in a good place in terms of our mental health and well-being is absolutely central to being motivated, to being engaged. But we also know from lots and lots of research now that those things are intimately connected with children's learning and achievement. And I think the power of what we're doing in Empathy Lab is really taking advantage of how engaging with books does have those multiple benefits, not just in terms of learning, not just in terms of academic skills development, but also in terms of building connections with other people. But we need to spend a little bit of time thinking about what empathy actually involves, because there's no doubt that it's part of emotional literacy, part of being competent socially, part of being emotionally intelligent, part of what we're hearing a lot about these days, character and resilience. But can we be specific about what actually is driving children in this world of empathy? Empathy is actually very multifaceted. I don't think it's right to even describe any individual as being simply high in empathy or low in empathy, because actually it's very, very multidimensional. I want you to think a little bit about what those dimensions are, because I think books have a role to play in several different ways with respect to empathy. First of all, there's this one that we've probably, it's probably the thing that comes to mind most obviously when we think about empathy, is how we respond emotionally when we see someone else is distressed, right? It's that classic situation. Someone else is hurt, or you can see they're being victimized by someone else. Do we show an empathetic reaction to that person? Do we have an emotional response ourselves? Do we feel something as a result of someone else's social and emotional experience? But this is not the only thing, because there's another really important dimension, which is understanding other people's emotions. Because we might have, as very young infants do, a negative emotional reaction when we see someone else's distress. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we understand that person's emotional reaction. Probably not, right? So there's something very important, and I think we've heard the phrase perspective taking today. And perspective taking is really crucial. Stepping into someone else's shoes and walking for a while in someone else's shoes isn't simply happening at an emotional level. It's happening at a cognitive level as well, because you have to understand how other people are thinking, how other people are feeling. So you've got to have some insight into the link between beliefs and emotions. That's what perspective taking is all about. And the third dimension. Imagine if you're in a situation where you can see that someone else is distressed. You can understand why they're distressed. You even feel the negative reaction yourself. But you just stand there and watch it. Or you go off somewhere and you don't do anything to help, right? You'd say, wouldn't you, that there's a bit of an ingredient of empathy that's missing there, right? So action is really important as well. And of course, action arises from some motivation. So we talk about this as a kind of a pro-social motivation, that there's the intention or motivation to try and help a person who's distressed. And importantly, in all of these things, there are individual differences. You could have individuals who display more or less of an emotional response to other people's distress. They're more or less understanding of others' emotions, or more or less motivation to help other people. All of these things, I think, come through in the literature that children engage with. And I think it's really important not to lump them all together and to say, this is good empathy or this is high empathy, but to really think about what these things look like: emotional, affective, and behavioral. And that's the approach that we've taken, isn't it, in the Empathy Lab. We talk about the ability to feel and understand other people's emotions and perspectives, and I want to emphasize the feeling and the understanding and recognize that it does have these different dimensions: affective, cognitive, and then the empathic concern. It's a core life skill. It's vital for kids' relationships with each other. It's vital for their relationships all the way through the life course. It's still relevant to each one of us in our daily lives. If we think about the way that we interact with our families, with our friends, with people that we work with, empathy is at the root of it. To a greater or lesser extent, it's there in every single social situation that we encounter. And that means that the potential for social change is absolutely amazing. Right. If we can harness these skills, promote these skills, foster them in our school environment, and I can't remember who asked the question about the family context, but if we start making that connection with families in the community as well, go beyond the school gates, I feel like I'm on a soapbox now. The potential is huge. And I'm just going to end with this point to say that talking about stories seems to be really important. And that's what we've done over the last few years, again with my colleagues in Italy. We've been doing a lot of research looking at how we can use conversations as the basis, and these are conversations about stories, as the basis for promoting this empathic social understanding. So I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into some of the different factors that are involved in empathy. What I think we'll be able to explore for just how powerful reading books can